Take your Bibles tonight, please, and go to Acts. Think we'll ever make it through? It's really something. I think the last time, according to the back room, I handled verse 1 of chapter 22 and showed you that word defense was apologia, which is transliterated into our word of apology, and in the theological world, apologetics. One of the reasons Paul had to go through this is because he had flipped on the revelation that had originally been given to him. And whenever you flip out on God, then you got to apologize for your lack of knowledge or believing or your walk. Well, it's certainly a tremendous chapter. And when, verse 2, and when they heard that he spoke or spake in the Aramaic tongue, it says Hebrew here, it was Estrangelo-Aramaic to them, they kept the more silent. And he said, I am verily a man which am a Jew, verily a man, a Jew, born in Tarsus. Cilicia was the province, yet brought up in this city, that's Jerusalem, at the feet of Gamaliel. Gamaliel was the grandson of Hillel. He was the one that wrote so much of the, tradition, commentary that the Jews went by. What? Talmud, that's right. At the feet of Gamaliel. And this is literally true, because the teacher would always sit on a raised dais, like as if I sat on this table here, crossed my legs and sat on here, and then you kids here would just sit at my feet. That's literally their educational system. A very beautiful statement. Brought up in this city, Jerusalem, at the feet of Gamaliel. He must have been in the city when he was not over 13. And taught according to the perfect manner of the law of the fathers. Taught according to the perfect manner of the law of the fathers. You know, that means according to the law that they set for Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, the whole trip, all of those things. And was zealous. And the word zealous, you should remember, means one that's, the zealots were called zealots because they were zealous for what they believed in. And this zealousness toward God can be right and it can be wrong. As ye all are this day. Well, what were they trying to do to him? Trying to kill him. They were zealous, and they were zealous toward God. They thought they were doing the true God a favor by the way they treated Paul. So zealousness is much like sincerity. Sincerity is no guarantee for truth. Zealousness is no guarantee for truth either. You can be zealous for something without being right on. And he relates here how, according to the perfect manner of the law, he was zealous toward God. And I persecuted the way. And as I've told you, before people were called Christians, they were called followers of the way. And we all know that this came from Jesus' teaching and statements where he said, I am the way. We have it in John, the truth and the life. And the people who followed the Lord Jesus Christ were called followers of the way. And it was sort of a derogatory, thing. They say, oh, they're followers of the way, followers of Jesus Christ. And the reason for that was, of course, because they thought Jesus Christ was a counterfeit. They'd crucified him, and anybody that was crucified that was really to be defamed, and, the no-gooders are crucified. And therefore, since Jesus Christ was crucified, this word, followers of the way, has that negative connotation, or what they thought is, they lift their noses or something. In Orientalism, he teaches something about the nose. Yeah, you're a follower of the way, attitude type of thing. And he says, I persecuted the way unto the death, binding and delivering into prisons both men and women. You see, I often wonder about these things when I read them in the Word. How much respect would the world have for you if you had a history like Paul had? And then you got saved, born again, and then you start moving with the greatness of the Word. Some of you have had a little taste of this kind of verse where your life in the past didn't measure up to what all the people thought. Now you got born again. And I can see the real human side to this thing, which of course was real devilish, where, one time they hated Paul because he was, out in front. Next time they hated him because he accepted the Lord Jesus Christ. It was one thing after another. Can't doubt Paul's sincerity, that's for sure. And you can't discount his zealousness, because he persecuted unto death, and that's about as zealous as you can be for something. Binding and delivering into prison both men and women. And that tells you that it was a real devilish, adamant type of thing. Because ordinarily they wouldn't have brought the women. They'd have just brought the men and put them in prison. But this thing was, Paul was so sincere about destroying Christianity or followers of the way, that he not only got the men, but he took the women, ripped them away from their kids, and left their kids go by themselves. And also the high priest doth bear me witness. The high priest here is perhaps not the same high priest that originally wrote the papers for Paul to utilize and take with him. But the high priest doth bear me witness literally means that it's available in the records. And all the estate. The estate is the Sanhedrin, the council the ruling body of Judaism, and all the council of the elders, from whom also I received letters unto the brethren, and went to Damascus to bring them which were there bound unto Jerusalem for to be punished. And it came to pass that as I made my journey, and was come nigh unto Damascus, about noon, suddenly there shone from heaven a great light round about me. There are 3 records in the book of Acts of Paul's experiences on the road to Damascus. This one here in chapter 22, another one in chapter 9, the first one is in chapter 9, and the last record is in chapter 26. I think it's 9, 3 to 8, 26, 12 to 18. It's interesting. Sometimes you just have to lay the 3 records side by side and see them. There are no contradictions, just a matter of understanding and certain segments with a little more illumination maybe and added to than others. Here it says about noon. This is midday. Suddenly there shone from heaven a great light round about me. I do not know for sure, class, but I believe that this great light is what is referred to in the Old Testament and other places as the Shekinah glory of God. The reflection off of the tables of stone on Moses' face was that Sunday night I talked about it. They couldn't look on Moses' face. The pillar of fire by night type of thing that's used in the Old Testament. These are all things that I've worked and studied regarding God's presence. The time when he moved with, was it Moses? He'd hit in the cleft of the rock, and he walked by and he could only look at his hind parts, because he couldn't have looked upon the great glory of God, the Shekinah glory. It would have blinded him. I think this was that Shekinah glory, the glory of God, shone from heaven a great light round about me, and I think that was what occurred that day. And I fell onto the ground and heard a voice, a phono. The word phono is the voice, and it's like in phonograph, is where they got it from, the word phonograph, hearing. That was real phenomenon, wasn't it? Real beautiful. And without your understanding of the operation of the manifestations of the Spirit, a lot of this stuff will just be guesswork for people. The voice saying unto me, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? And I answered, Who art thou, Lord? He realized it had to be the master over his life, because he was just totally blinded, just what you would call struck down. That doesn't mean God struck him down, but the light was so blazingly bright he just fell on his face. And he said unto me, I am Jesus of Nazareth, whom thou persecutest. He did not say, I am God. He said, I'm Jesus of Nazareth. I think this is the only record of the three that mentions that he was Jesus of Nazareth. I don't recall for sure, but that's it. Whom thou persecutest. And that's real interesting because he was persecuting the followers, right? The believers. But as he was persecuting the believers, who was he really persecuting? Jesus of Nazareth. And they that were with me saw indeed the light, and were afraid. Those words have to be omitted, were afraid. But they heard not the voice of him that spake to me. I think in one of the other records it says they did hear. The difference is in the statement here. This is in the accusative case, and that puts it, they heard like a voice. They heard the voice, but they didn't understand what was being said. It's like as if you and I talked together, and they could hear me back there, but they couldn't understand what we were saying. That's what this word, they heard not the voice of him. They heard not to the end of understanding what was spoken. And I said, what shall I do, Lord? And of the three accounts, this is the only one that adds that. It's very evident in the others, but it doesn't say it. Here it says it. And I said, what shall I do, Lord? And the Lord, who is Jesus of Nazareth, said unto me, arise and go into Damascus, and there it shall be told thee of all things which are appointed for thee to do. Outside of the way ministry, I don't know of any group that believes that he was born again here on the road to Damascus. I don't think they do. I don't know for sure. In that record, in verse 9, they heard not the voice of him that spake to me. Everything that God said to him, I do not believe is recorded in the Word. But this is recorded that we can know what God said in and regarding these specific things. And when I could not see, for the glory of that light being led by the hand of them that were with me, I came into Damascus. And you know, Damascus was one of the great cities. I think isn't it today the oldest continuing city in history? City of Damascus? It's much more exciting to enter in the city of Damascus than it is in Wierwille town, I guarantee you. At least I enjoyed it a lot more. And one Ananias, a devout man according to the law. That's interesting here. None of the other records carry that. One calls him a disciple in Acts 9. Remember, I teach that in the foundational class. Over here, he says this Ananias was a devout man. Remember, who's that said of time of the birth of John the Baptist, isn't it? Or the pregnancy. that occurred there between Zacharias and his wife. They were both devout or something, and it means God-fearing, lovingly zealous. This Ananias was a God-fearing man, according to the law. To me, it's tremendously important and significant that God would send him to Ananias. It's really something. A devout man according to the law, having a good report of all the Jews which dwell there, that is in Damascus, came unto me and stood and said unto me, Brother Saul. And that has always been my key to believing that he was born again on the road to Damascus, because I am sure that this Ananias, a devout man according to the law, would never have called him Brother Saul had he not been born again, or God told him that he was a real believer. And the whole record in here doesn't tell us anything what God told Ananias. You got to go to Acts 9 to see what Ananias was told. Going to the street called Straight, and Brother Saul, receive thy sight. And the same hour I looked upon Ananias, him. Same hour means immediately. Right at that time. Then look what Ananias, the disciple, said. The God of our fathers has chosen thee, that thou shouldest know his will, and see that just one. See that just one, and shouldest hear the voice of his mouth. I believe that this just one here refers to Jesus Christ, and shouldest hear the voice of his mouth refers back to where I am Jesus of Nazareth, whom thou persecutest, in verse 8. For thou shalt be his witness unto all men of what thou hast seen and heard. I think, if I remember correctly, the word witness is the word for martyr. Bullinger have this in his Bible for the word witness. What is that word witness? Martyrios? Pardon? Right. And that's martyr. For thou shalt be his martyr, his witness. And it's significant that the word witness is takeoff off of that word martyr, which simply means, in plain language, if you're going to be a tremendous witness, you've got to pour it out, ma'am. You've got to lay down your life. You've got to share it. You've got to move with it. Unto all men of what thou hast seen and heard. Verse 16. And this is the verse that they used to show that he was not born again on the road to Damascus. Now why tarriest thou? Arise and be baptized, and wash away thy sins, calling on the name of the Lord. I believe that verse 16 is in here because of verse 12. One Ananias, a devout man, according to the what? Here was a born-again believer, but he was still zealous for what? And therefore, he commanded this to be done in verse 16. Otherwise, he called him Brother Saul too soon, because he was not his brother until he was born again. And now why tarriest thou? Arise, be baptized, wash away thy sins, calling on the name of the Lord. And it came to pass that when I was come again to Jerusalem, this is some 3 years perhaps later, even while I prayed in the temple, I was in a trance. That was simply revelation. Not at all what the spiritualists teach. Because verse 18 says, saw him, revelation, saw him, saying unto me, make haste and get thee quickly out of Jerusalem, for they will not receive thy testimony concerning me. And I said, Lord, they know that I imprisoned and beat in every synagogue them that believed on thee. And when the blood of thy martyr Stephen was shed, I also was standing by, consenting unto his death, and kept the raiment of them that slew him. And he said unto me, depart, for I will send thee far hence unto the Gentiles. It's quite a record. Came to Jerusalem while he was praying in the temple. Went back to the temple. And he saw him saying unto me, make haste and get thee quickly out of Jerusalem, for they will not receive thy testimony concerning me. When this revelation is given to Paul, he leaves Jerusalem right now. This was some 3 years after his conversion, I guess, or whatever period of time he is involved in there. Yet, before he goes to Jerusalem this particular time, the Spirit witnessed in every city, telling him not to go, and he's still what? Now he's in Jerusalem here, talking about how he got there after his birth and period of time in Arabia. And then the Lord spoke to him and told him to get out quickly. And it's typical old Paul arguing again. But the Lord said, depart. And I said, Lord, they know I imprisoned and beat in every synagogue them that believed on thee. He was a man who, academically, commitment and everything else, they should have listened to and should have said, well, boy, you did a great job when you were with us. Maybe you've seen added light we haven't seen. But they didn't love him at all. They only loved him as long as he took those papers and went out and brought the Christians in. Then they backed him up. Now look what they're doing to him. And he uses it as an argument, apologetics. beat in every synagogue them that believed on thee. And when the blood of thy martyr Stephen was shed, I also was standing by, consenting unto his death. And I believe the only reason he could do this was because Paul was a member of the Sanhedrin, a very important position, one of the 70. And in order to be a member of the Sanhedrin, he had to be at least 30 years old and the father of a son or child. And he said unto me, Depart, for I will send thee far hence unto the Gentiles. And they gave him audience unto this word. Until he said that, they listened to him. Then they lifted up their voices and yelled and said, Away with such a fellow from the earth, for it's not fit that he should live. Isn't that something? Before that, when he was persecuting the Christians, whipping them, even having them killed, he was a wonderful guy. Now, since he's not hurting anybody, not whipping anybody, not killing anybody, they want to kill him. Said, Away with such a fellow. He's not fit he should live. And as they cried out, number one. Number two, they cast off their outer garments, their clothes. Number three, they threw dust in the air. And they just picked up the dirt and threw it. And three things in that verse. They were really teed off. In verse 24, the chief captain, what was his name, Lysias, commanded him to be brought unto the castle. He saw what was happening, because after Paul spoke, the people really got angry and violent. And the chief captain, perhaps not having heard or not being able to understand the language in which Paul spoke, assumed that because of the violence of the people, Paul must be a real bad guy, and bad that he should be examined by scourging. 30 lashes with the whip. And the way that these lashings occurred, according to some of the old pictures, is they tied their hands and feet on like a pole, and the pole was at this angle like this. They'd be, hanging on that pole, hands and feet tied, and they whop it to them with a whip that had thongs at the end of it with either little pieces of bone or little pieces of metal. 30 lashes. That's how they got people to tell the truth. Whop them. And he examined by scourging. The reason was that he might know wherefore they cried so against him. He wanted Paul to tell the truth, because he thought there was something wrong with him. And as they bound him with thongs, the leather around the hand, had him tied to this whipping post, Paul said unto the centurion that stood by, Is it lawful for you to scourge a man that's a Roman and uncondemned, no trial been given him? And when the centurion, leader of 100, remind you of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, the centurion was present, heard that Paul said he was a Roman, he went and told the chief captain, saying, Lysias, take heed what thou doest, for this man is a Roman. Then the chief captain came and said unto him, Tell me, art thou a Roman? And he said, Yep. That's something. This could have even taken more time than you would think, because he could check on this if he wanted to. And I think that's what he did between verse 27 and 28. And when he's all checked it all out, then the chief captain answered, With a great sum obtained I this freedom. And Paul said, But I was freeborn. There are three ways you could get Roman citizenship. One was to buy it. Another was to earn it for great gallantry or service. A third was to be born free. I do not know how his father had acquired this. All I know is that he had it, because Paul was born free, Roman. I forget now, but if you'll read it carefully, I think there are either 5 or 7 different defenses that Paul makes in the Word of God here now, in these next few chapters. All because he didn't obey the original revelation, don't go Jerusalem. Now he's just got to defend and defend and defend. You know, in that day, to be a born free was quite something. To be a Roman citizen, freeborn. Really something. Then straightway, verse 29, it means immediately, they departed from him, from Paul, those which should have tortured him, which simply means beat him, because that was the method of torture used to exact truth from people. And the chief captain also was afraid, after he knew that he was Roman, and because he had bound him. It isn't in just the binding, it is that they bound him to a whipping post to whip him. That's what he was afraid of. Because a Roman citizen could be bound and brought to justice, handcuffed, you would call it. But he could not be handcuffed to a whipping post and whipped without a trial and condemned. Because later on in the Word you will see they handcuff him and take him to a location. But here, on the morrow, verse 30, because he, the chief captain, would have known the certainty wherefore he was accused of the Jews. And this is one of the statements that convinces me he either was not present or he didn't understand exactly what Paul said because of the language he was using. He loosed him from his bands and commanded the chief priests and all their council, the Sanhedrin, to appear, and brought Paul down and set him before them. And that was simply to let them pass the judgment, because they were the ones that were so upset by Paul, and he didn't understand everything went on, so he said, well, there's your court, I'll put you in your own court. And that's exactly what occurred here. Just one trouble after another. People say, well, at least he got to witness. Well, guess that's right. But it isn't right in the great sense in which the word moves. The only reason he got a chance to witness is because he had been out of alignment and harmony and walked into Jerusalem when God told him not to go, so now he gets in jail and all kinds of trouble. Then he has to appear before the chief priests here, before the chief justice or the centurion, all the rest of them, and then he just keeps talking about what God did for him and what he used to do. And so I don't think the word or the statement that it gave him a good chance to witness is apropos at all. I don't think it makes any sense.